And so we're going to back it up now and look at why these wise men from the east, right? So that's the first thing, is that these wise men play that kind of protective role of Jesus, the way the midwives did it before the Exodus, to protect the infants who are being thrown into the Nile. So why these wise men? Here's some things that I'd like you to consider. In verse 1 and 2, it says, after Jesus was born. So they weren't there to see him born. It was sometime after. In the days of Herod, wise men come to Jerusalem, apparently being led by God through the star, going, where is he who's been born king of the Jews? So some things to consider. Likely these wise men were astrologers, obviously, and they're probably from Persia, Babylon, Arabia, and maybe they're even familiar with the works and the writings of Daniel and the other Israelite exiles in Babylon. You know, wise men, enchanters, astrologers, magicians, these are usually the kinds of men associated with kings and high powers. You read the story of Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar, both pharaohs, Pharaoh with Abraham, Pharaoh with Joseph, Pharaoh with Joseph, and then Pharaoh with Moses, the kings of Persia. Like, these high and lofty kings surround themselves with these men to have like secret knowledge to help them with their kingdom endeavors. And the East, something to consider, because it does say they come from the East in the biblical story, and you can just figure this out for yourself and study this out. But the East is very often used to indicate exile and further separation from God. You know, Adam and Eve, they're exiled from the tree of life. There's the bodyguards, you might say, the cherubim and the flaming sword, are put at the east of the garden. After Cain does his thing and kills Abel, he's exiled to the east. In Genesis 11, they're coming from the east to build the Tower of Babel in the city with their name to the heavens. But here, there's a different image taking place. The wise men are coming from the places of exile, because at Genesis 11, they're just dispersed again. They're just thrown back out and given over, with their languages and nations that they belong to, respectively. But here, the wise men are coming from the places of exile, from the pagan nations, in order to be part of what God is building, his temple, his kingdom, and his son. And I think very clearly with the wise men, usually associated with these kings and being pagan in nature, and this is an image of God bringing the nations to the ultimate king, to bow before him, as prophesied in the Old Testament, right? God's coming kingdom by the son of David, the nations will come in. And then verse 3, it says, when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Apparently, those that are surrounding King Herod are not for this as well. This is a very similar response to Pharaoh and his counselors when they begin to see that Israel is multiplying, and they're like, we need to conspire to end this so they don't, side with our enemies. Or even when Moses and Aaron approach Pharaoh after each sign that comes upon Egypt. This is a very similar response. And then verse 4, it does say that he assembles the chief priests and scribes of the people and inquires of them where the Christ was to be born. So just like Pharaoh, King Herod here, this new Pharaoh, in town, he's trying to stop his fears from coming true. He's paranoid. There's a threat to his power and kingdom, just like Pharaoh saw with the Israelites. Rather than seeing blessing and abundance, he sees a threat to what he's built in his power. Okay, so that's likely why the Magi or wise men are coming from the east, because it is a redemption of the nations happening with Jesus. The kingdom is come in him. He's the promised king, and the nations are bowing and coming to him. The second question, is why is it a star that leads them to Jesus, right? Well, if you go down to verse 7, Herod summoned the wise men secretly and asked them what time the star had appeared. It's interesting that we get no details about that answer. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, go and search for them. I want to worship him too. After listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. Here are some things to consider, okay? And again, this is not thus saith the Lord. This is just me examining scripture, okay? It's as if these wise men are being guided like Israel was. Remember when Israel comes out of Egypt, they're led by God through a pillar of fire by night and a pillar of cloud by day. And eventually, after the tabernacle is built and filled with the glory of God, that cloud or that pillar of fire at night would rest on the tabernacle, and that would guide the people, right? The people of Israel would know it's time to leave and move out to the next destination when the glory cloud or the pillar of fire would lift off the tabernacle. They would visually see that and know God is leading us elsewhere. Now, when the pillar of fire or pillar of cloud would rest on the tabernacle, that would tell the Israelites, oh, it's time to settle here. This is where we're parking it, because the king has told us this is the place to stop. So it's as if the king is leading them, right? Because they're a theocracy under God. And this is the same way, if we look at the language here, it says the star they saw rested over the place where the child was. This is the same language used in John 1, where he sees the Spirit of God rest on Jesus at his baptism to mark him as the Son of God and the Messiah. Well, here, there's a star resting on the place, not just to mark the space, but to mark the person that makes that space sacred and special. Hey, if you don't know me, my name is Jason, and you can find everything about this ministry on abovereproachministry.com. All of our Bible resources, our online church, ways to support this ministry, and so much more. And if you live anywhere near Spartanburg, South Carolina, come check out our church on Sundays at 10 a.m. Also, I have 2 brief updates for those of you that are part of this community. Number 1, the revision of my book Fruitful is coming out soon, hopefully in the next few weeks. So be sure to grab a copy of that when it does release. And number 2, we now have options on our website for monthly support. And when you become part of our monthly support team, you get access to all of our exclusive teachings and videos that get released every week. This is just my way of saying thank you. All right, that's all I got for you. Let's get back to the video. Another thing to consider is Balaam. He's a seer in Numbers who ends up coming against Israel and using knowledge for his own twisted gain, and leads Israel into a curse by cursing themselves through disobedience and idolatry. Well, before that happens, Balaam has a vision. God gives him a legitimate vision, and this is what he says: I see him, but not now. I behold him, but he's not near. A star shall come out of Jacob. A scepter shall rise out of Israel. So notice this star language is associated with royalty, kingship, reigning, kingdom, right? The promised son of David, the true greater Solomon and king of Israel, the king of the world, Jesus. Or you might say that in Joseph's dreams, when he has dreams about the stars bowing down to him, that's like noting his status in Egypt. So it shall crush the forehead of Moab and break down the sons of Sheth. Edom will be dispossessed. Seir and his enemies will be dispossessed. Israel's doing valiantly. And one from Jacob shall exercise dominion and destroy. So the enemies of God, those who side with the kingdom of darkness and Satan and refuse to bow the knee to the God of Israel, they have made their choice in rebellion and disobedience. And this king, this star that rises out of Israel, will not just establish a kingdom, but will crush the enemies. Not all nations, but there's always a remnant within the nations. So it's not nations bad. It's unbelievers that reject God, hate his kingdom and his son. They're on the side of the enemy, so they get crushed in the process. So I think that's likely something to consider when we look at why is it that it's a star leading them. When we look at all this kingship language and Jesus being the king of the Jews, the last question to answer is this, right? Why did they bring these 3 gifts? Right? They begin to open their treasuries in verse 11, and they offered gifts to him. Unprovoked. This is just what they bring. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And I want to make something abundantly clear. This is not just about the wise men bringing gifts to a king. That's usually how this is explained. They know he's the king. True, but there's more than that. Whether they're aware of it or not, them bringing gifts and offerings in this way, they're bringing gifts to God himself. Hey, if you enjoyed this clip, you're going to love the full teaching. Check out the full video by clicking right here, or check out the full series playlist right here as well. And be sure to visit abovereproachministry.com for all of our free resources. And as always, keep moving towards Jesus.